Hey, Jimmy, mind passing me the chocolate spread?
Sure, dude.
Thank you. Wait, when did you refill your glass?
I never refilled my glass. It was that way when the scene cut to me.
Oh, wait, now you're not even eating bread anymore.
Never really liked bread anyway.
Where does your beanie come from?
It's my favorite beanie.
That doesn't answer the question, and now you're not even wearing the same shirt anymore.
Hey, I'm not the one looking after continuity for this thing.
And now you're not even human anymore. What the hell is going on?
That was a little weird.
Attention!
How you doing, everybody? Andrew Scott, and you are back at the VO Booth Camp. So the other day I was having a coaching session with one of my clients, shout out to Anthony, and one of the things that we were talking about was work process and some tips and tricks for things like workflow. And one of the things that I brought up to him was most DAWs now, this is a change from 5-6 years ago, most DAWs now have a feature where you can pull up a little notepad and put in reference points that will help you if you ever have to pull the mix back up and, redo something or fix something, because we have so many moving parts in production that, well, frankly, it's hard to remember. And this leads to a greater discussion about something that I want to talk to you about today, and that is continuity.
Continuity is the principle of making sure that all details and individual elements of a production are consistent throughout a scene, take, or production overall. If a production upholds standards of continuity, each individual element feels as though it seamlessly flows from the previous element, presenting a cohesive whole, even though recorded individually and oftentimes out of order, reinforcing a sense of realism in the story, that is, in the case of film or narration, or a consistent product from element to element, for example, commercials in a larger campaign.
Now, there's tons of examples of continuity errors, and, the internet is a vast repository of history of embarrassing continuity error moments. I think the most recent one that's in the public consciousness is some of the continuity errors they had in the last couple seasons of Game of Thrones. Things like being able to see somebody's green screen device, or most infamously, a rogue Starbucks cup that got left out in front of some, ancient thing or person or something. I didn't watch, I don't know. But I think one of my favorite examples of preserving continuity ties in nicely with this time of year. We're moving into the holiday season, and for people of my generation, Generation X and the tail end of the boomer generation, we always think of this scene.
Oh my goodness! Oh, the humanity! People are running about. The turkeys are hitting the ground like sacks of wet cement.
Yeah, the infamous turkey drop scene from WKRP. Now, WKRP to this day remains one of my absolute favorite TV shows. It harkens back to all the things that I'm nostalgic about. AM and early FM broadcast radio, and just, it was a good time in my life as a young man. But one of the things that it points to by way of continuity is our friend Les Nessman. And it took many people a long time to spot this. Some people got it right away, but others not so much. If you look carefully, the character of Les Nessman, played by Richard Sanders, almost always had a Band-Aid somewhere on him. And it moved from episode to episode, and sometimes inside episodes. Now, the apocryphal tale that I've heard is that Sanders injured himself the night before the very first shoot and had to wear a bandage. And the producers just decided to make a running gag of it. And every single episode, he would have a different bandage on in a different place, and that was the running gag. Now, running gags are a great indicator of whether or not you're keeping up continuity. Because by definition, it's a running gag. It's something that's always there. And so preserving that continuity, even at times preserving the incongruity of the continuity, meaning the Band-Aid was always moving and you never got an explanation of why he was injured, and you never saw him getting injured on camera. And so that's a great example from my generation about how to preserve or take into account continuity when you're doing a long project or something episodic. But what do we mean by continuity as it pertains to voiceover production and things like narration? So primarily, continuity is something that's very important when it comes to long-form narration. And you can have continuity issues by way of your environment or your gear, or you can have continuity issues by way of read. So, I've copped to this a number of times in the past. I have a bad habit, and I'm better at it now, but I have a bad habit of not pre-reading my scripts and going in cold. And it's fair to say that that bites me in the butt pretty frequently when I do it.
Excuse me, you're biting my butt. No, I'm not. Yes, you are.
And one of the reasons why is because it doesn't allow me to see down the road and understand how to provide continuity in the read. Now, continuity in the read can be things like where the emotional arc is going, or where the conversational arc is going, or depending upon how you mix your final product, how the action in the story is moving. Are these people outside in a snowstorm? And then the next day, when you're doing another chapter, they're still out in the snowstorm, but you're talking like they're just inside and not battling the elements. This is even more important when you do something like a spatial mix. And I've just recently completed a project with two of my VO compatriots, Seth and Eric, and I'll make sure to link to that either down below or at some point in the future because it's a neat project and I want you guys to hear it. But, a lot of times narrators simply narrate and they don't take into consideration things like spatial processing. And, that's fine. Every producer is different. But me, I tend to try to, by way of EQ and certain plugins, equate the environment that the characters are speaking in so that they don't sound like my narration. And that's a step beyond what a lot of producers do. I choose to do it. You might not. But simple continuity things like, were they just running down the street and you're doing your delivery like this to try to emulate that, and then the very next sentence, but now I'm not. That can be really jarring. But even if you're not doing something episodic, let's say we're talking about broadcast narration or broadcast VO, things like commercials, or you've got a YouTube client that you do your work for on a regular basis. You need to be able to provide them with continuity. And I'll give you an example from my own business. So I do a lot of narration work. I've done it for the last almost 3 years now for a very large sports-centered YouTube channel. And round about 2021, moving into this year, I changed up microphones. I went from a Rode pod mic to an SM7B. And they have distinctly different sounds. Now, one of the things that I did for this client was when we finally kind of settled into a sound, I had saved in that note feature in that DAW information about volume settings, gain settings, and other things that would affect the sound. But I also actually saved that entire project out as a template, so that every single time I did another one, and at one point in time during the fat of the pandemic, we were doing like 2 to 3 a month. I just pulled up that template so everything was exactly the same as it was the last time I did a video for him. So that's kind of what I mean by project continuity. And that's exactly the same thing that happens when you are getting involved with somebody who's going to need your voice for things like broadcast VO on the regular. You need to be able to recreate what you did as closely as possible to what you delivered to them that they bought from you. Because if things work out well, they're going to come back. And generally, they're going to want that sound again. They don't want their spots to sound so different from each other, if those spots are, generally speaking, kind of the same type of spots. Now, there's always going to be exceptions to this. There's going to be times where they want to do something completely different, and so you got more elbow room. But if you don't preserve the ability to do that as a forethought, you're certainly going to have a harder time doing it as an afterthought. And continuity even goes towards things like mic address and environment. Were you using the same mic? Now, that should be obvious to you by now. If you're doing long-form narration, in the middle of a narration or a project is not the place to switch horses. So you should be using the same mic all the time. But it also goes down to things like mic address. Is your body posture pretty much the same? Are you addressing the mic the same way, the same direction, from the same distance, consistently all the time? Those little changes are one of those things that the human mind, the human brain, notices without you noticing that it notices. And when it notices a slight difference, it goes,
Bill, what? Strange things are afoot at the Circle K.
So if you don't observe continuity, both in your environment and how you record things and how you deliver the script, things just kind of feel off. You might not notice, and other people might not notice, but they might. And when they do, things just feel...
Oh, Al, you can't smoke in here. I totally deserve that.
And this can even go down to things in your recording environment that have changed. In the middle of a project, have you recently moved a bookcase? Or have you changed your orientation of your computer monitor or your laptop? Those things might not jump out to you and your ears as you're doing it, but they're probably slightly noticeable in the recording. Now, not all the time, but generally speaking, it'll be when you least expect it and when you can least afford it to happen. It might not even be some kind of big glaring change. It can be super subtle. The human brain, particularly the unconscious mind, is constantly listening for slight differences because that's what our lizard brain uses to tell when something is different in an environment and we might be getting in trouble or attacked or something bad. And as a producer, you're responsible for taking into account the conscious mind of the listener and the unconscious mind, because the total of that is what is listening to your product. And the total of that is what's deciding whether or not it's good. And sometimes different equals weird. And frankly, weird is just weird. Do you want to provide weird? Or do you want to provide a product that people come back for? It should probably be the latter. Good producers strive for consistency because that provides continuity. So make sure to have consistency and continuity in mind when you're producing your material. Because at the end of the day, that's what people are going to come back for. Until next time, folks, I'm Andrew Scott, and you've been at DVO Boot Camp. See you later, everybody. Bye-bye. And no, I'm still recording. That's good. Continuity is important, kids.
You're dismissed. Can I please go to the potty now?